Welcome, brave souls, to the chilling depths of horror and detail. Today we're going to share park ranger horror stories. First story, UK park ranger experiences. I have been a park ranger in a national park that's located in the United Kingdom, England, for just over 10 years. I'm not going to tell you which one, or even the county of which it's located for the sake of my job as I still work here, but there are some pretty weird things that you find every so often while on shift. Things that my superiors would likely not appreciate me sharing online. My job mainly involves patrolling the trails and checking that they're all in a safe state for people to walk through. I was also asked to talk with school children in assemblies and such after about a year on the job to express how important it is to stay with the group and on the trails. I gave pretty obvious reasons for this, but little did I know I would soon discover some of the horrifying truths as to why they should never wander off. The first story I'm going to share with you took place on a beautiful spring morning in June, I think. This was during my first year on the job. The sun was still low in the sky, but it was slowly rising and brightening my surroundings. I was on a normal morning patrol through one of the deeper trails as it hadn't been checked recently and protocol to frequently check all the trails for fallen trees and any potential natural hazards to hikers. It was such a beautiful morning. I remember walking along with a slight smile on my face as I listened to nature waking up in the trees, and I found the cool breeze very relaxing, and it had a truly peaceful effect on my mood. Suddenly, the trees to my left were filled with the sounds of birds squawking loudly as they frantically flew away. I stopped and listened for a moment. Silence. A quote from another story I have read here reads very true to this situation. Prey is silent when predators are near. Now, understand that we don't have any bears or wolves here in England. Nothing like that, so I suppose it could be a deer that had snapped a twig. However, the noise wouldn't usually drop like that as deer don't pose much of a threat to wildlife at all. I continued on, not thinking anything of it, and after a short time, I got the urge to check behind me. There was a man walking maybe 100 meters back, and I was on a long straight, so it was easy to tell. I was confused as the trails aren't usually used until a little later when early dog walkers would show up, and even then few would wander this far into the woods at this time. He seemed to be walking at a very relaxed pace. His hands in his dark blue hoodie's pockets, and he had faded blue jeans. I radioed over to ask if anyone had seen someone enter the trail I was walking shortly after I left, but no one had seen anyone come in or out other than the occasional dog walker. I thought nothing of it, but continued on at a slightly hurried pace. I usually wouldn't be bothered about being out on my own with another stranger. I wasn't a small bloke, nor someone to get spooked easily. However, this guy just gave me a bad feeling. I was approaching a gate that leads to a much denser area of the woodland, more like a thick forest. And as I closed the gate behind me, I noticed this man had stopped dead in his tracks. He seemed to be staring right at me, but I couldn't be sure. Then he broke into a sprint, not a light jog that someone out for exercise might. I'm talking a full-on sprint. It was almost aggressive. I freaked out and turned to run. Why would a complete stranger who was previously so calm and relaxed suddenly be sprinting at me? He hadn't called for help or even waved to me. Fortunately, the trail's long straight section was over, and I ran round a curve and hid behind one of many large rocks that were by the side of the trail. I could hear his heavy footsteps thudding towards me right until he was just on the other side of the rock, and he stopped. Again, dead in his tracks. He wasn't even out of breath. He just seemed to stand there for a while, and then just walked off. I waited for what must have been close to 10 minutes to be sure he was far ahead and radioed the strange encounter to my colleagues, who agreed it was strange, and I cautiously continued on with my patrol. I never saw that strange man again, and I hope I never do. I have many more memories I would like to share with you. Stay safe out there, kids. You are rarely truly alone in the forest. I'm back with another story I'd like to share with you. Or rather, I feel the need to share with you, as there's nothing I like about it. When someone goes missing in our national parks, the British Search and Rescue Team are contacted immediately. However, they are always at least half an hour's flight away, and even then they only have so much flight time before they are forced to turn their helicopters around to refuel. This leaves a lot of searching down to the rangers, as we know all of the areas and trails very well. It's always an adrenaline pump situation to be in, as you never know what the outcome will be. Usually, the helicopter spots the lost people within 20 minutes of joining the search. But then there are the missing people. You should know that between the rangers, we refer to these situations with two categories: lost people and missing people. A lost person is a normal search and rescue scenario. Someone went down the wrong trail and hasn't been seen in a while, and perhaps throw in a broken leg for good measure. The main thing is that we find them, even if they're a little beat up. A missing person is someone who hasn't been seen for anything over a day, or if the situation seems off. For example, when people just seem to disappear. I have one particular case I'm going to share with you. I will warn you closer to the time, but there is some pretty explicit content in this memory. So here is your far pre-warning. It was a pretty standard shift. The sky was just starting to dim as the sun started sinking towards the horizon, and I was sat in the ranger station taking calls and checking emails when a woman comes bursting through the door absolutely beside herself. Her hair is a mess with leaves tangled in it. Her makeup is all smudged down and across her face, and her eyes are red from crying. She's telling me that her son had been by her side 1 minute, and when he went into the bushes, just off the trail, for a wee, he never came back. There was no scream, no noise, no nothing. I knew at this instant that we had a missing person on our hands, and my heart stopped. A missing child was always bad news and seldom had a happy ending. He had been in the bush for maybe 2 minutes when his mother called out to him, and she went running into the woods to try and find him. She was very lucky to have made it back to the trail without getting lost, or worse if you ask me. I tried my best to calm her down and took her to a map, and after showing her where our station was, I asked her to try and locate their average location at the time while I made some calls. She protested at first, but after assuring her we had dealt with this kind of situation many times before, she brought herself to trust my instructions and started tracing her tracks on the map. I immediately called the SAR team closest to us and told them the exact location was to be confirmed, but to dispatch a helicopter for a missing child. They give us an ETA of 40 minutes. I gather all the rangers on duty, and after confirming with the woman where she believed they were when he disappeared, we all get assigned grids on the map to check, and we head out. We are very thorough as we search, and we each square the grid very effectively and do not leave so much as a rock unturned. So we're getting deeper and deeper into the woods at this point. We've been searching for a good couple of hours, but the dogs hadn't picked up the boys' scent yet, and we were merely doing a routine comb-styled search. The helicopter was buzzing around non-stop, and everyone was as quiet. No one really spoke much while looking for children. I think it's because of the fact that it's a child we are looking for, not an adult who may be able to look after themselves. I'm getting this heavy, knotted feeling in my gut. You know, the kind you get when you just know that it's going to be a fruitless effort. I should also mention that it's getting dark now, and there's not much light left, and what little is left is completely blocked out by the trees, so it's flashlights from here on out. We'll never find this kid, bro, my colleague said in a completely flat voice. Don't talk like that. We never know what we could find while searching, I reply sharply, though deep down in my gut, I knew that child was gone. The helicopter heads back for more fuel and comes back again. After a further few hours of searching, it is getting very dark, and we call it a night, as everyone needs to be back before the forest was completely consumed by darkness. The woman stayed in one of the medical beds we had previously prepared for her son, though I doubt she slept at all. I watched the cameras that lay deep in the forest, somewhat in the area the child could have walked in. After an hour or so of nothing, I eventually decide to call it a night. We didn't find this boy the next day, or the day after for that matter. 3 weeks later, one of our rangers radios that they've found the body of the child deep into the woods and that we need to get there and fast. She sounded worried. A few rangers and I jump into a 4x4 that we use to get deep into the woods quickly, and we make our way to the location described. It's a clearing near an old entrance to a closed cave. The trees seem to all lean over towards the cave entrance, as if to be watching intently for whatever is next to climb out. We arrived after a 10 or maybe a 15-minute ride. It was one of the most uncomfortable and tense rides of my career, as the vehicle access trail was rarely used, as we didn't have much reason to come this far into the woods, and we never traveled at this speed. We parked in the clearing and approached what would turn out to be one of the most disturbing experiences of my career. I would like to take this opportunity to warn you that what I describe next could be disturbing to some and cause upset, as I can only label it as child abuse. The boy was curled in the fetal position, laid on his left side, and it may have looked as if he died naturally if it wasn't for the huge pool of blood he was laying in, along with the fact that he was completely naked. We rolled his stiff body over onto his back, and I think we all took a step back, as if some force had pushed us all away at the same time. Some sick fuck had sliced his gut open, allowing all his innards to spill out. But the horror didn't end there. Oh, God, no. Please understand that this is not an easy memory for me to recite, so forgive me for not going into too much detail, though I doubt I will feel like they missed out. The left everything of this boy was gone. His left eye, left ear, left testicle, left hand, foot, etc. I was mortified, and I'm not ashamed to say that I threw up violently almost instantly upon taking all of this in for a moment. Every cut was very neat and clean, more so than you'd imagine a surgeon could make them, especially out in the woods. What was even more horrifying was that the body couldn't have been more than a few days old. Whoever, or whatever for that matter, had taken him and done this had kept him hostage for almost 3 weeks. The thought of how terrified this child must have been still sickens me even now, nearly 7 years on. We called it in, and an air ambulance took his body away to be examined by the police and checked for prints, etc. Now, we're not really meant to be kept in the loop on following investigations after they've left the park. However, the local police officers would tend to update us regularly on the results of these findings. An officer had rung up to update us, and his voice sounded dull. He sounded almost as if he was very depressed to be making the call, and I can understand why. The post-mortem had revealed that the cuts all seemed to be taken from when the boy was alive. Furthermore, it seemed that there were no traces of food in the boy's stomach, so he clearly wasn't fed either. Apparently, there were more body parts missing, but I just thanked the officer for informing me and hung up the phone slowly. I sat there for a good 20 minutes bawling my eyes out before relaying this horrific update to a few colleagues. How that little boy didn't die sooner is beyond me. I can't contemplate how this could happen, but whoever or whatever did this is definitely dangerous. Extremely dangerous. That trail was closed off for a good time, and there were armed patrols through that area of the woods for nearly 4 months, following in a desperate attempt to find a trace of who did this, or at least where it happened. We found nothing, not even the other body parts. They even explored that of the cave that was still safe to access, despite it being closed off due to many deaths due to a lack of safety. This is not the only experience of this nature that occurred. However, I'm going to cut it off here. I am done writing for today, as I got emotional just allowing the memory to crop back to me. Please, keep your children close by your side, and if they need the toilet, they must either wait or you must accompany them, and never stray far from the trail. No more than 5 meters would be my recommendation, not unless you know exactly what you're doing. Second story. I'm a park ranger. I never should have patrolled on New Year's. I've always loved the woods. There's nothing quite like it. Being in nature, the green and brown of foliage, the skipping rivers and streams, the bird calls and wind in the trees. A beautiful world alive with animals and plants. Majesty around every corner, from the smallest sprout to the tallest mountainous peaks. The whole forest is one community in a way, tree roots like hands holding each other beneath the soil, sharing memories unspoken. I'm sorry, I got a little carried away. I'm rather passionate about nature. Since I was a kid at church camp and I went hiking for the very first time, I found myself a total outdoors nut. And earlier last year, I finally got my dream job. a park ranger position at the biggest national park in Ontario, Pewkaskwa National Park, working at the northernmost HQ. When the virus hit, it was hard for all of us. The park ended up closing to visitors. Luckily, I kept my job. I ended up staying in the HQ for the first portion of lockdown with a few colleagues. Normally, national parks close to visitors for the winter, which obviously makes sense. It's the most dangerous time of year for hikers and campers. Quarantine kept us closed the entire year, so it wasn't anything new. Pewkaskwa is no different in terms of its closing policy, but it was different in the sense that some of us rangers ended up having to stay at the HQ over the winter. There was no fear of fire. Obviously, we were shaping up for a frigid and snowy winter, but as I was confused about the reason, my co-workers didn't raise a fuss. They knew exactly what we were in for. I asked Chris what was going on, and he looked at me with an expression like, "You don't know." "Don't sweat it, Max. It's nothing to worry about." In the past, we've had people jump the fence to get in during the off-season, so upper management just wants us to keep an eye out to make sure nobody gets in and gets themselves hurt. He assured me. I felt comforted by the sentiment, figuring it'd be a piece of cake. The only issue is that I know this seems contradictory to my previous statement about nature, but I felt an uneasiness about the whole situation. Laugh at me all you want, but I've always had a sort of paranoia about winter. It's by far the most dangerous time to be outside, especially in a place like the forest. In the spring, you fear the rain, being drenched and catching a chill. In the summer and early autumn, you fear wildfires. And in all three seasons, you fear the animals. But in winter, the cold alone is enough to kill you, being caught in a blizzard, or even just spending the night with no shelter. The thick layer of snow hides everything. One wrong step could send you falling into a frozen lake or a tree well. The animals are less of a fear. The bears are asleep in their caves, and the wolves won't ever get close. But that only makes the place even more frightening to me. In winter, the forest doesn't feel like a forest. The trees have shed their leaves, and the animals are hidden away. It's deathly quiet out there. Everything is muffled. The loneliness itches at you when you're out that far. The days feel like open mouths. It's only as the sun dips below the horizon that you truly see the teeth around you. I remember being young and asking my pastor why God would ever make winter if it was so difficult for anything to survive in it. I didn't get a straight answer from him. But I digress. You understand what I'm getting at by now, huh? Suffice it to say, I had my anxieties about spending the winter so close to the woods. I recall every morning waking up in my room, and although the presence of 5 other people in the HQ with me brought me comfort, feeling uneasy, I would get dressed in the morning, enjoy a meal cooked by Priya around a table with my friends, lace up my boots, and zip up my coat, and then it would be time for work. I felt childish for it, but I would deviate from my path of patrol frequently to seek out my fellow rangers, sometimes to approach them and talk, but other times just to see them through the trees. Knowing they were out there brought me peace. December was drawing to a close. It was Christmas Day at the HQ. We didn't all celebrate Christmas. Quinn is Jewish, Priya is Muslim, and Christopher and Bree are both atheists, but we still decided to do a gift exchange. It wasn't anything too fancy, just some trinkets to make the place feel more at home. We'd grown close to each other over quarantine. It only felt right. Being inside on that day, sitting around the wood-burning stove, and giving each other our gifts felt right. We were in the midst of dinner when things went awry. The thud at the door caused me to jump. It was so out of nowhere that for the first few moments we didn't even move, just looking around at each other in confusion. It was Thomas who got up to check. We heard him swear from the door. That got us to move. On the front step, there was a stag's head. The bloody stump was dry, but its fur was stained with rusty brown, eyes milky white and vacant. We'd all seen dead animals before, but we knew there was something wrong. I looked around at the others, but they all had knowing looks on their faces, albeit annoyed ones. Chris was the first to speak. It was probably a prank. Someone might be out in the woods, he said. The others nodded. We should pair up and sweep the front entrance area. They can't have gotten far. Everyone began getting dressed for the outside. I looked over my shoulder longingly at our abandoned Christmas dinner, but I didn't complain, not wanting to seem selfish. Someone could be hurt out there. Even if they had pranked us so cruelly like this, I didn't want to think I might indirectly be the cause of someone's death via frostbite. I got to walk with Quinn, luckily. He's been here longer than most of us, second only to Christopher, about 6 years under his belt. We were walking down the trails rather than in the bush, the white beam of the flashlight making the fresh snow glimmer as we plodded through the thick layer of powder. We made small talk, quipping about the dinner, the presents we'd gotten from our co-workers and our family members in the mail, and the deer head. It got quiet for a moment, only the sound of the snow under our feet and the wind whistling through the pines. And then Quinn turned to me. "Hey, Max," he asked. Did anyone tell you about the year walk?" I shook my head, giving him a confused look and slowing my pace. He sighed quietly and slowed down with me, muttering in annoyance that no one had told me yet. "Yeah, I thought so. You seemed confused when the boss let us know we'd be staying over the winter." "What is it?" I asked. He pursed his lips, trying to think of a way to explain it. "It's an old Swedish tradition that happens around this time of year. People spend New Year's night walking through the forest until sunrise. Apparently, they think if they do it, they'll be given a prophecy about the coming year from a goat spirit, or whatever." I cocked my head, slowing to a stop. "Okay, what's so important about it?" "From what I hear, it's come back into style in some circles." He chuckled dryly. "Last year, some people jumped the fence into the reserve to do a year walk. They were half frozen to death when we found them. Luckily, they survived, but He trails off, as if he has more he wants to say, but he shakes his head. "Upper management doesn't want to risk it happening again, so they told us to stick around over winter. We'll all get a bonus for it, though, so that's a plus. He patted me on the back hard, and I mustered up a weak laugh, even though that feeling of unease just continued to grow. The whole tradition reads as something demonic, something my parents would have clasped their hands over my ears to keep me from hearing. It's intriguing, but I don't let the thoughts of it linger with me as Quinn changes the subject. We didn't end up finding anything. Neither did anyone else, except for Thomas and Bree. They found the deer's body in the snow, slumped against a tree stump and frozen, with footprints all around the clearing and leading off into the woods. That night, I could hardly sleep. It wasn't about the deer, it wasn't about the year walk, and it wasn't about those footprints. It was about what I knew I'd have to do. Patrolling the woods at night in the dead of winter. I don't know why it was frightening me that much. It shouldn't have been a big deal. It would be just like any other night patrol I'd taken, only in the middle of winter. The idea of it made me feel queasy. I don't know if it's a true phobia. I know it's irrational. It's just a regular occurrence, a normal portion of the year, and yet I couldn't will myself to sleep. It was in the wee hours of the morning. I still couldn't get any rest. Even though I couldn't sleep, I just laid there in bed, staring up at the ceiling and tracing the wood grain with my eyes. I was shocked out of my trance by the sound of crunching snow and ringing bells outside. I sat up in bed, shuffling to the edge of the bed and looking out the window. Nobody there? The wind continued to whistle in the trees, and the forest was silent. Slowly getting to my feet, I wandered over to the window and peered around. The crunching sound was quieter then, petering off to my right. When I looked down, there were footprints in the snow under my window. I threw open the window and stuck my head out, looking out to where the crunching was headed. And there was nothing there. That didn't exactly help my predicament, only highlighted my fears and added a dark, unknown void to my paranoid, anxious thoughts. In the morning, I woke up and put on my clothes. I ate cereal for breakfast and chatted with Bree and Quinn before we all put on our snow gear and got ready for our first patrol of the day. By the time we went outside, there had been snowfall, washing away all evidence of the footprints outside my window. I try to keep my mind off it. We walk on our own during the day. It's bright enough we can find each other pretty easily, and we have walkie-talkies if anything goes wrong. I felt like I was being watched that day, but I couldn't place what I was being watched by. The day passed without incident, and so did the day after that. And the one after. Just 3 days until New Year's, and my anxiety continued to mount up. I asked Christopher if I could stay in and file our incident reports. He let me spend one day inside, thank God, but when they were out in the woods doing patrols, I could hear the crunch of snow and ringing of bells again, circling around HQ. It happened again the day after when I was lagging behind to wash the dishes after everyone had left. It happened each night too, walking around and around. I was sure I was just hallucinating or my mind was playing tricks on me, But despite myself, I couldn't shake that feeling of dread. I prayed for the first time in years that night, clasping my hands together and quaking in my bed, praying I catch a cold or break a leg, anything for an excuse not to patrol that night. On the morning of December 31st, I woke up an hour ahead of schedule. I crawled out of bed and wandered to the bathroom in my pajamas, splashing water on my face. My head hurt so badly. My knees buckled under me, and I wrapped my arms around the edge of the toilet. I tried not to look at my vomit, eyes squeezed shut and stomach lurching as I lost last night's dinner into the bowl of the toilet. My anxiety had reached its peak. Even breathing turned into gasping, wheezing hyperventilation, hysteric sobs escaping my choked throat. I pressed my hand over my mouth, digging my fingers in to keep anyone from hearing. The bathroom felt more like a confession booth, claustrophobic and closing in on me, judgment from the other side of the door, even though I knew nobody else was awake. I put on my clothes. I had no appetite for breakfast, and when everyone woke up, I acted as though nothing was wrong. I kept up my chipper attitude. I picked at my lunch. I filed more incident reports. And nighttime finally came. The snow was thick and cold. I could see all of the stars in the sky. The patrol began according to plan. I was paired up with Bree. We talked, but I wasn't much for conversation. I was too busy letting my fear get the best of me, my eyes darting around and my hands shaking under my mittens. I couldn't bring myself to look at Bree, fearing that she would notice the fear in my expression. After a while, the conversation petered off, and we were walking in silence, sweeping our flashlights around through the trees. After a long while of silence, I cleared my throat and looked to Bree. Bree wasn't there. I spun around in a circle. Bree wasn't there. Bree wasn't there. She had just been there, just a few feet behind me, but I looked around again. Everything looked different. I'd walked this patrol path dozens of times, over and over, but nothing looked right. The trees were all wrong, stretching up high into the night sky. There was no sound, just the crunch of footsteps and the whistle of the wind. I could feel my heart rate picking up. I could feel my breathing begin to quiver and rattle in my throat. And then my flashlight fizzled out, and I started to shake. I fumbled my walkie-talkie off my hip and tuned it to the right frequency. This is Maxwell, asking for backup. Is anyone there? I stammered into the receiver, voice cracking pathetically. All I got in response was a garbled static sound. No matter what I did, I repeated my message over and over, until my voice had dissolved into babbling whimpers, and I fell to my knees in the snow. There was no response, just a superlative fear and loneliness that hit me like an oncoming train. I curled into a ball, hyperventilating and crying into my knees as cold crept in on me. My jacket kept me safe, but still I could feel the cold on my face. I don't know how long I stayed there, paralyzed with fear and unable to move an inch, just praying to a God that I knew couldn't hear me to let it all be a terrible nightmare. I heard a sound then. Ahead of me, the crunching of snow. I looked up. In the path ahead, I could see a figure walking away from me. I was up on my feet and running after it in an instant. I called out, my voice still hoarse and raw from crying, yelling for them to stop and wait. They just kept walking. Even with their slow pace, I just couldn't seem to catch up. My hope made me reckless. I didn't notice the root in front of me, and I stumbled forwards, falling face down into the snow. When I looked up, the figure was gone. I shakily got to my knees in the snow and stared forwards if looking long enough would make it come back. I could hear ringing behind me, but I couldn't bring myself to turn around and look. The two of them walked past me, two women wearing traditional-looking Scandinavian dresses and white veils. In one hand, they each carried a swaddled blanket drenched red in blood, and in their other, a bell, ringing with each step. They left a bloody red trail in their wake, droplets of blood in the snow from their children. They spoke blankly, without any tone, speaking in a language I couldn't understand. Era till good for Dedabarn. Era till good for Vara Barnes Valsignels. Vitar med dem till onum akaturlum Hansgava. Her Valsignade AR6 for Vart Bidrag. I felt sick. I felt my hands grow sweaty and my throat closed up. I followed them. I got to my feet and trudged after them, unable to cry anymore. There was a river ahead, rushing across the path and splitting it in two. I kept walking. The two women walked to the river edge and let their children fall to the ground, blankets falling open full of nothing but bones and mulch. I started hearing other people walking in the woods, taking their own paths, all converging on one point. I didn't run towards them no matter how much I wanted to. I couldn't bring myself to change course. It was a trance. I know that now, but I didn't understand then. In the middle of the clearing there was the monument. It wasn't supposed to be there. Nothing was supposed to be in the woods. There should have been nothing there at all, but it was a pillar of wood with a stag head on top, a spike through its skull to keep it in place. At its base was the body the head had once belonged to, split open to expose its innards. Steam still rose off of it. It was fresh, still warm. There were others in the clearing, all standing at the ends of their own pathways, staring up at the monument with adoration. The deer head's mouth gaped open, tongue hanging out, and eyes rolled up to show whites. It began to speak without its lips moving. Kom framat mina barn. Den good har valsignat oss med kroppen av sin fadson. Var glad, for det abroadsamhan har get dig ar in helig prophetia. Glad dig at. It groaned out in joyous suffering, its blood dribbling down the pillar in beads. I didn't understand, but the others there did. They scrambled forwards through the snow, dropping to the ground in front of the body of the deer and pulling fistfuls of gore and bloody guts out of the animal's body with wet tearing sounds. I felt sick, I felt terrified, I felt so hungry. I sank to my knees in front of the body and reached forwards. The parts were indistinguishable from each other, mashed together and disgusting. Tears streamed down my cheeks as I shoved pieces of raw deer flesh into my mouth, metallic and chewy and textured in a way that made me want to vomit, but I just kept eating. Why was this happening to me? What was I doing there? I sobbed into my bloody handfuls of venison, leaning down and beginning to tear at it with my teeth, licking the blood off my lips. If there was a God to hear my screams for help, it was cruel enough to turn away. Shame and guilt and fear roiled around in my stomach, and the moon shone down on me like a spotlight at its highest point. The world shrank around me until nothing but the body of the deer and the monument were real. I leaned back, blood drenching my face and hands in front, staring up at the deer head as it stared back at me. Du ar Anerlunda. Du var inte tankt att komma hit. Men du ar valsignad. Du far gava. I didn't understand. I couldn't understand. I kept eating, even as I cried. Lightheadedness set in. I staggered to my feet and stumbled away from the clearing, weeping openly and staring at my bloody hands. What have I done? What's happened to me? I am a monster. I couldn't run, just stumbled away as much as I could, tears and mucus mingling with the blood that coated my face. I fell to the ground and sobbed into the snow. I covered my ears when I heard people screaming from the clearing behind me, and curled into a ball to hide when they ran past me in their new forms, hooves leaving bloody marks in the snow. I splayed out where I laid, and even the silence that fell over the forest was deafening, ringing in my ears. I could hear it now. I could hear everything I couldn't before. I could feel the cold forest pumping and beating as one, screaming as one truly living, breathing being despite the snow cover, a being that would consume my body to support it just as I had to the body of that deer. Oh God, there couldn't be a God. This breathing, amorphous being was God, a frantic and hungry God, a spiteful and ancient God. It was everything and I was part of it. Oh God, oh God. I must have passed out. When I woke up, I was laying on the trail I'd been on with Bree, and Priya was shaking me awake. She looked terrified, and I didn't understand why at first, until I noticed the blood all over me. It was real then. Priya helped me to my feet, and I leaned against her heavily on the way back to HQ. They asked me what happened, and I told them I couldn't remember anything. They were so worried for me, but they didn't seem surprised at the outcome. I think I was just like those people from the year before when they found me. I'm getting a few weeks off. I can't return home. Ontario is in lockdown again. I spend most of my time in HQ, and the others try to console me. It makes me happy to know they care, but Nothing feels right anymore. I can't walk in the cold woods anymore. I can hear the trees moaning hungrily when nobody else can, and I'm one of the lucky ones. When I look out the window to the tree lean, I can see the deer with human eyes pacing and drooling red, jealous that I was spared when they weren't, even when I never wanted this gift. And when I sleep, I can feel the forest itself breathing, more alive than it's ever been. Third story. My brother disappeared while working as a park ranger. The drive through this part of Nevada was beautiful. The tall cliffs were lined by majestic pines while the road leisurely wound through the scenery. But no matter how amazing the view was, it couldn't change the fact that I was out here to deal with something incredibly unpleasant. My brother Jason worked as a park ranger until he suddenly went missing one night. No one knows exactly what happened. From all appearances, he seemed to have gotten up from the ranger station to check on something routine and never came back. There was an extensive search, but nothing turned up. The ranger station had been found exactly as it should be. There were no signs of a struggle, no strange tire tracks or footprints leading away from the park, and no eyewitnesses who reported seeing Jason anywhere after that. So here I was trying to do what everyone in my family wanted me to do and see if I could find anything. Was I optimistic? Not really, but stranger things have happened in life. All I knew was that I was here to look around, and that was what I was going to do. It was late afternoon by the time I arrived at my destination. The town the park was located by was as average as could be. A main street lined with a variety of shops and stores and residential areas that branched off it. A place you've seen on 1,000 brochures and postcards. I parked in front of the local pizza restaurant. Not only was I hungry, this would be a great opportunity to see what people around here were like. If they were open and welcoming, especially if I mentioned my brother, I'd know what I was dealing with. If not, that meant something was up, and I would get out of there as quickly as possible. The pizza place had a few customers this time of day, so I got right in at a table in the middle of the restaurant. I decided on a medium pepperoni pizza and relaxed in my seat while sipping my water. Once I was done eating my pizza, which was very good, I paid the bill and left a generous tip and headed to the park my brother had worked at for 2 years until he vanished one night. The park looked like any other I'd seen. Well-maintained, neat, and orderly. The kind of place you'd like to have a picnic in. But of course, nature is like anything else. What you see on the surface is only a fraction of what is really going on. I drove up the neatly landscaped driveway and parked in front of the ranger station. My shoes crunched on the gravel as I got out of the car and approached the building. I was expecting an old rustic cabin, but this ranger station was relatively modern, with large bay windows and a gleaming metal facade. I approached the front door, knocked, and waited. A moment later, it opened and a man in a ranger uniform looked at me. "How can I help you?" he asked. "I'm Alex, Jason's brother. I'm here for some information." "Oh, I see. Come right in." The ranger held the door open and pointed to a sitting area. "I'll let the boss know you're here. Can I get you something to drink?" "I'm fine, thank you." "All right. We'll be right with you." And with that, the ranger hustled down the hallway, and I was left alone. I hadn't given anyone a heads up I was coming. I didn't want anyone to prepare for my arrival. My brother had gone missing several weeks ago. It was just a question of why. I don't believe he just ran off for no reason, so that meant there had to be a reason why. And everyone, me included, wanted to know what that was. Since he went missing at work, it seemed obvious to be work-related, but it was entirely possible that it was connected to something else. It could have been something he encountered while at work, but had nothing to do with the job itself. Personally, I've never been a huge fan of camping or anything like that. I certainly appreciate nature, but I'm definitely more the stay inside and read a book type. Jason was always much more enthusiastic about the outdoors, and it wasn't a surprise to anyone when he became a park ranger. Just like it was no surprise to anyone when I became an architect. And here we were. At that moment, an older man who was also in a ranger uniform came out and faced me. "Alex?" "Yes. I'm Tim, park manager." He shook my hand firmly. "Nice to meet you," I said. "Likewise." Jason was a good ranger, and we all liked him. So if I can be of any help, don't hesitate to ask. "I appreciate that. And what I need now is information." Tim nodded. "Of course. Why don't you follow me to my office?" He led the way to his office, a small room with a neat view of the park entrance. Once I sat down in a chair facing his desk, and he leaned back in his desk chair, we started talking again. I would love to say we have new information for you, but we don't. And it bothers me. We've never had an incident like this in the history of this park. I see. The only other thing I can think to add is that about a week or so after he vanished, I was out on my route checking on things, and I could feel someone watching me. Just for a moment, but it was there. And I had no idea who was responsible. Because when I looked around, I didn't see anyone. Interesting. Do you mind if I ask you a question? Not at all. What do you think happened to your brother? I've thought about that a million times. The honest answer is I don't know. But I don't believe he just ran off. That isn't Jason. That's fair. And for what it's worth, I don't believe it either. All right. Now it's my turn to ask you something. What are the odds that something happened to Jason out here? Tim paused as he considered my question. Somewhat possible. I've always liked working here, but the woods are the woods. And things happen out there, no doubt. Okay. The next logical step is to think that if something happened in the woods, where exactly was it most likely? Are there any locations around here something odd tends to happen at? Places people tend to steer clear of if they can avoid it? It doesn't have to be in the park, but around town. Tim chuckled. Oh, that would be the old quarry. No doubt about it. Or more exactly, what's left of the old quarry. You know, mining used to be the big industry out here? I do. What's happened at the old quarry? That I know of? The usual things people would prefer to forget. And that's just what we know of. Can you point me towards it? Tim stood up from his desk. I could do better than that. I can show you where it is. Great. Tim led the way in his truck, and we were there in 15 minutes. We parked on a small cliff overlooking the quarry itself, which was now filled with water. A group of 5 people were sitting further down on the cliff, and they glanced at the two of us with slight interest when they saw our cars pull up. When we got out of our vehicles, we briefly glanced at each other, and Tim gave me a slight nod of encouragement. Then I stepped forward. I'm looking for some information. My brother's gone missing. He was a park ranger. If you can help, you'll be compensated for it. Then I took out my phone, pulled up a picture of Jason, and held it up so they could see it. The group all looked at the photo for a second. After a moment, I saw one of the guys do a double take. I've seen him, the guy nodded. Less than a month ago. I got chills as he said this, because that would be right about the time Jason went missing. Where was he? The Wistful Pines Inn. It's a hotel about an hour away, Tim said. What was he doing? Nothing in particular. Just hanging around near the road from what I could tell. But from the look in his eyes, he seemed very focused on something. Thank you for your help. I reached in my pocket and gave him a $100 bill. Then Tim and I headed for the Wistful Pines Inn. It was your typical roadside motel with 2 stories and a swimming pool in front. There was also a small sign advertising where the front office was, so I headed there while Tim stayed in his truck. Standing at the front desk was an older woman with long silver hair. Hello. How can I help you? She asked politely. My brother went missing in the area about a month ago, and I was wondering if maybe you'd seen him here. Then I showed her the photo. There were no signs she'd ever seen him before. No, I'm sorry. I don't recall seeing him here. I put my phone away. Thank you. But that doesn't mean he wasn't here. Just that I didn't see him. What was his name? I gave her Jason's full name, and she deftly typed it into the computer in front of her and paused for a moment. Nope. Nothing in our records either. We don't have security cameras, so there's nothing to check there, I'm afraid. I really appreciate your help. It was a long shot anyways. A tip. She nodded. I see. Well, your tip may be right after all. Because strictly between us. Her voice lowered a bit. A film crew was staying here for about a week while they were in the area to film part of a documentary. They haven't been seen since the night before last. The idea settled in the air uneasily as she pressed a few buttons on the computer before turning the screen so I could see it. On it was a local news article about the film crew who was in town to do a piece about abandoned mines. The film crew all looked to be close to me in age, and by all appearances they seemed happy and content. Thanks for telling me. Sure. I have no idea what happened, but good luck with finding your brother. Come back if you need anything else. Thank you. Then I left the office and told Tim what I found out. He sat there quietly for a moment before he started talking. We've dealt with a lot of people wanting to get footage of this or that over the years. It's amazing, really, how nature can be dangerous enough when you know what you're doing and have tons of experience. No doubt. Is it possible that they disappeared not just because they were filming, but because of what they were filming? Tim considered it for a moment. Absolutely. Just a thought? No, I get it. It's a valid question. We have no idea what they were filming, but we can always double-check. It's certainly possible that they were filming something completely routine and stumbled onto something they didn't intend to. I shivered slightly at the thought. One person going missing could have many explanations. Two going missing doesn't have as many possibilities, but a number of scenarios could have happened depending on the circumstances. But a group? That's inherently unsettling because it strongly suggests something bad happened. But with nothing left to go on, I had no choice but to call it a day, especially since I had actually accomplished something since I got here. So I grabbed some dinner at a local diner and planned to go back to my hotel room. I had just gotten in my car when there was a knock on the driver's side window. My jaw dropped when I looked up and saw Jason. He was dressed casually in clothes that looked a little beat up, but there was no mistaking my brother. I immediately opened the door and climbed out of the car so I could take a good look at Jason. His clothes were worn, he'd been spending a lot of time outdoors, and he looked a little gaunt, but it was him. I never thought I'd ever see Jason again. I thought he was lost forever, so I was ecstatic to see him. I could barely believe this was happening. "Good to see you, Alex," he said nonchalantly as if our meeting was the most routine thing in the world. "What is going on here?" I failed to keep the shock out of my voice. "I ran." "From what?" "Them." The simplicity of the response was chilling. It said so little and so much at the same time. "Them?" I asked. "Let's just say I was out in the woods, and it turns out I wasn't alone. I barely got away." "The film crew that vanished?" "I don't know anything about that, but it doesn't surprise me. We need to get out of here. Right now." From the look in his eyes, I knew Jason was seriously afraid of something. And since I'd accomplished what I set out to do here, I had no reason or desire to stay. So I got back in the car, he hopped in beside me, and I pulled out of the parking lot. "How did you know I was here?" I asked him once we were heading down the road. "I've seen you around town. Where should we go?" "Away from here." "Got it." "Can I ask why?" "Of course." While working at the park, I'd heard rumors of the area's past. By now I'm sure you know it used to be a prosperous mining area a few decades ago. Or at least it was until there was a nasty accident that resulted in the mining company closing down after a bunch of people died in the mine after there was a cave-in. I heard rumors that there were a few people that survived the accident, but never came out of the mine and vanished into the hills. I'd always considered it just a campfire story until one night a few weeks ago. A group of people came out of nowhere, chased me into a cave, and I'd thought I'd never get out. When I was finally able to escape, I was in the middle of nowhere and had to use my outdoors experience to find my way back here, especially since I had no idea how many were out there or if I was being followed. That was why everyone thought I'd disappeared. If anyone could make it through that, it would be you. Appreciate it. The road we were on had narrowed down to one lane, and I was acutely aware that we were surrounded by tall trees on this stretch of road. But when the road turned and I saw the road was blocked by a massive fallen tree, my stomach clenched and I felt my blood freeze in my veins. I quickly tried to back up, but when I did, I felt the tires run over something and I knew they would be flat in no time at all. I didn't dare get out of the car. That was what whoever was behind this wanted. So I took a deep breath and looked outside. Darkness had settled on the area, and there were only a few streetlights illuminating the road out here. But even that was enough light for me to see some shadows moving at the far end of the road by the woods coming slowly towards us. The sight made me grip the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. "What do we do?" I managed to ask Jason. "Stay calm. They want us to panic." Before he could say another word, headlights blazed to life out of a cluster of trees to our right, and I thought for sure the vehicle they belonged to was going to crash straight into us. But I watched as the vehicle in question, a small RV, roared past us, parked alongside us on the curb, and the driver's side window rolled down. I got another shock when I realized it was one of the members of the missing film crew. "Get in," she yelled to us. She didn't need to tell us twice. Jason and I immediately got out of my rental car and ran to the RV's door and climbed inside. Once Jason slammed the door shut, the driver immediately took off and we were out of there. As I tried to catch my breath, I found myself face to face with the rest of the film crew, who were sitting comfortably around the RV's interior. "Thanks," I said once I'd sat down on the floor. "No problem," a woman with curly blonde hair, who was sitting in an armchair, said. "We've been watching what they were up to for hours. We knew they were up to something. We were just waiting for them to act, so we could do something about it." "Is that why no one's seen you guys for a while?" Jason asked. A guy sitting on the couch nodded. "Yes. We'd stumbled upon them while researching a different abandoned mine, and it became the subject of our footage." "Are you that park ranger who went missing?" "Uh-huh," Jason said. "I stumbled across them too." Jason and the film crew talked for the rest of the drive until we eventually made our way back to town and went straight to the police. After we explained what happened and the film crew showed them the footage they had, the police went out to where my rental car had been left on the road. It was just as we'd left it. They searched the area thoroughly, and nothing ever turned up. But at least now everyone knows to be alert, and that's something. After that, Jason came home, and everyone was beyond stunned by what happened. No one was surprised when he took another park ranger job, but this time much closer to home. The documentary the crew had been working on was eventually released and won some awards. Jason and I even went along to a few showings to talk to the audience. It was definitely a unique experience. Fourth story. Why I quit my job as a park ranger. Hello everybody, my name is Denver Dark. I'm 19 years old, fresh out of high school, working as a park ranger at Callan State Park in Virginia. My job is pretty easy. I don't usually patrol the park. My job is to sit in a radio room and wait for people to call in if they need assistance. This can range from someone needing the bathroom door unlocked to a drunken fight. A couple of months ago, though, I had an encounter with some type of creature, or maybe even an alien. I'm not sure at this point. This forever scarred me, and I will always be paranoid of the forest. It was a normal evening at the park. I looked over at the clock on my desk as it clicked over to 6 p.m. Well, here goes to another night by myself, I said out loud as I saw all of the other park rangers packing up to leave. Another hour passed, and as I was eating my dinner, static started coming through the radio. After a couple of seconds of just the static, a girl's voice started to come through. "Hello? Hello? Is anyone there?" I paused for a second after chewing another bite of my food. I had never heard anything like this over the radio before, so I picked it up. "Hello, this is Officer Dark here." "Yes," she yelled before continuing her sentence. "Please help me. Something is chasing me." I was dumbfounded. The creepy part was she didn't say someone, she said something. I quickly calmed myself before responding. "Calm down, miss. Tell me where you are so I can send help out immediately." "I'm at the old watchtower on the northeast side of the park. I ran here after it chased me out of my cabin. Please send help. I think it's close." "It's all right, miss. I'll send help out in dash." I was cut off by her shhhh. I stopped talking, listening to the radio. Then I heard a very soft but aggressive growl come from the speaker. "Oh God, it's here." As she finished her sentence, I heard a crash of a window and a large thud on a wood floor. The radio cut out. I was in complete shock. Did I just witness someone die? After about a minute of me being absolutely glued to my seat with terror, I started to gather a plan in my head. I spun around in my chair and grabbed the old park map off of the desk next to me. I unfolded it, frantically scanning it, looking for an old watchtower. There it was on the northeast side of the park, just like she said. To the looks of it, it would take me about an hour to walk there. I got up from my chair and walked over to the gun cabinet, unlocking it with the keys I had in my pocket. I grabbed the first gun I saw, a 12-gauge shotgun, along with some extra shells. I also saw the flare gun on the top shelf and decided to take that too. Before leaving the station, I made sure that I had everything that I needed. Shotgun, flare gun, flashlight, radio, pocket knife, and the map. I'm not gonna lie, I was scared to go out into the woods after that whole event. I also hated the idea of being alone, but I knew I couldn't just sit there and do nothing. As I exited the station, I was greeted by the cool breeze and a beautiful sunset of a summer evening. All of the night bugs and animals started to come out. I could hear the calling of the cicadas in the trees, while the crickets buzzed below them on the ground. It's weird because you wouldn't think that such a breathtaking scene could hold such horror that the lady experienced. Since it was a long walk, I started moving at a faster pace than I normally would. As I was about 10 minutes away from the tower, everything changed. Once an amazing sunset now turned the forest into a pitch black that no person could see into, along with the deafening sound of silence as the cicadas and crickets stopped chatting. This was extremely odd. I had been in this forest many times at night and nothing like this had ever happened. A few more minutes of walking later, and I saw the old watchtower. It was about 70 feet tall or so with a hut at the top of it. The watchtower had seen its better days, though it looked very old with it being damp and cracked in many spots. At this point, I was at the base of the tower. Right before I was about to go up on the first step, I got the worst feeling I have ever felt. My head started to spin. I was very nauseous and started to see stars. As this continued, I thought I was going to pass out. As the darkness around my eyeballs started to grow, everything stopped. I was normal again. Except for one feeling, it felt like something was staring at me. I swear I could feel its eyes piercing into the back of my head. Its glare almost felt sharp, like a knife had been jammed into my side. I spun around as quickly as I could, holding the shotgun in front of me. There's nothing, I thought, until I scanned the tree line in front of me about 50 or so feet out. Oh my gosh, I let out as I see deep in the forest. A pair of two vibrant green eyes staring at me. I was struck with fear, my eyes not being able to leave the sight, my feet almost cemented in the ground. After about a minute of me staring at it, it winked at me. After this, the eyes disappeared and went back into the brush. I didn't know what to think. The only thing that I knew was not to stay in that spot. I ran up the old wooden stairs as fast as I could, but then I remembered the radio call I had gotten earlier. I prepared myself for a bloody scene. But when I reached the top of the steps, the hut was empty. No blood, no body, no lady. The most disturbing thing of all, though, was it looked like this place hasn't been touched in years. The floors and desk in the room were both completely covered in cobwebs and dust. A large radio sat on the desk. It must have been the one that came through to mine, but that too was engulfed by the webs. Something very strange is happening. I just couldn't figure it out. On the edge of the desk was a stack of very old newspapers. My curiosity took over, and I picked one up. Date, 1978, headline: Woman attacked and killed by the Wampus cat. Locals say. This didn't make any sense. This couldn't be the same lady I just contacted. I needed to find out more, so I kept on reading. The next thing that I read sent shivers down my spine. The Wampus cat resembles a very large black panther, most known for their very bright green eyes. My blood ran cold. I needed to get out of this place right now, right as I shoved the newspaper into my pocket and was ready to run. It was too late. Before I could turn around, I heard a sound. That same damn bone-chilling growl I had heard on the radio. I turned around as fast as I could, raising my shotgun. There was the beast itself. The Wampus cat. This cat was massive, quite possibly the biggest mammal I had ever seen. It stood on all fours at a staggering height of at least 8 feet tall. It had deep old scars all over its body, probably from people like me. Its paws were the size of small dinner plates, and didn't forget its face. The lips were completely barred back, showing its dinner knife-like fangs. And the most important thing of all, those dang green eyes almost staring into my soul. I didn't waste any time and pulled the trigger, sending a slug at my target. I landed the shot, but it barely did anything. The cat staggered back when the slug hit him, but that's about it. How is this thing still alive? The round had left a bloody hole in its torso about the size of a dollar coin. But alas, the creature was pretty much unfazed. I decided to run for it, booking it to the exit, only to be stopped by the huge feline pouncing on my back and pinning me to the wood floor. The beast raked its long claws across my back, leaving an extremely painful wound. It felt like I was being burned with a hot iron. I could feel my shirt already being soaked with blood. I managed to flip around on my back to face the beast, holding its head away from my face. Although I was able to keep its head at bay, I wasn't with the paws. It started swiping at my face, leaving those searing claw marks on me again. I tried to reach for the shotgun on the ground next to me, but I wasn't able to. Blood from the gashes started to seep into my eyes, stinging them, not allowing me to see. With nothing working and all of the blood I was losing, I started to give up. There was no point. I couldn't overpower this thing. And right when I was about to give in, thinking about all of my friends and family, an idea sparked into my head. I reached in my pocket and pulled out the knife I had forgotten about. I flipped the blade open and immediately stabbed the cat in the neck with it. The beast reared back in pain, leaping off of me. This was my only chance to escape. I quickly got up and snatched the shotgun before sprinting down the stairs. I had a head start, but the cat was catching up. As I reached the bottom, it was already halfway down. I didn't have any time to spare. I ran immediately to the trails, not looking behind me. I could hear the big, heavy footsteps of the beast on my tail end. I knew eventually it was going to catch up, so I turned around, pumping 2 more slugs in it, staggering it again. I could tell it was hurt because it was moving a lot slower. I fired again in its direction, landing another shot with a bloody splat. Then the cat stopped running, turning around and slowly jogging the other direction. It finally gave up. This didn't stop me from sprinting back to the station. I used every bit of strength and willpower to make it back. As I busted through the door of the building, the biggest wave of relief came over me. I had beaten that thing. After attending to my wounds and grabbing a glass of water, I sat down in my desk chair, thankful to be alive. While reaching into my pocket to take out my phone, I felt paper. The newspaper. I pulled it out, scanning the article once again, realizing that I missed something before. The woman's body was found in the watchtower of Callan State Park, her body being mutilated, even missing some of her limbs. Even though she was killed, many of the people in the park say they can still hear her calling for help, just like that same night she was murdered. I was completely shook. I didn't know what to think. Was it a ghost or maybe a spirit? And right as I put the newspaper down, the radio buzzed, playing that same voice that started this all. Hello. Thanks a lot for watching the video till the end. Subscribe to our channel, Horror in Detail. Drop your opinions / suggestions in the comment section, and like the video as it helps with the YouTube algorithm.